inviting me. It's nice to see all you Rotarians. It really warms my heart to see all the great work you do in the community. And thank you, of course, to the Tacoma Art Museum for providing this really great space. I would like to know how many people here rode a bike when they were a kid? And I want to know how many people here rode a bike in the last year. Oh, good. And I just heard someone rode the Courage Classic. Is that true? This man deserves money and applause because he rode over 3 mountain passes, and well, there was a lot of beer, right? But it was still a great effort.
Carb loading.
So we have gone in Tacoma from a culture that started in the 1880s, really around the bicycle. And, you know, we've devolved into something else now, but I'm going to take you through the history of the bicycle in Tacoma. And this is our Halloween photo. That's 1930s. Every photo is from the Northwest, the library archives, Northwest room. So the library is a wonderful place for resources. So I have to give you first the abbreviated history of the bicycle. In 1818, a gentleman invented this device. It was wood and very heavy lead, and it had no brakes and really no steering and no pedals. Didn't take off well, because nor did we really have roads. You know, there was just dirt. But then, it's really the predecessor to the scoot, which is the best invention ever. And little kids now ride these things. They have no pedals. They do have steering. But this is how kids learn how to ride a bike now, and they don't ever need the training wheels.
They just don't have brakes.
The next bikes that came along were velocipedes. What you'll notice about these, I mean, they were heavy, again, made out of wood and metals, and the pedals were on the front wheel. And so that was what drove the bike. There was no drivetrain, and so you didn't go very far, very fast. And again, no brakes and sort of questionable steering. Then the penny farthing really came into popularity in the 1880s, early 1890s. These things were amazing in a way because until this time, you could walk somewhere, you could go on a horse somewhere, you could go on a steam train, but bicycling is the most efficient mode of transportation there is for short trips. And it was a very liberating force and a lot of fun, and people loved it very much, but the problem was that your legs were wedged right under those handlebars. There were no brakes. Going uphill was really a problem. Going downhill was more of a problem. If you hit a rock, if you hit a dog, you would go flying over those handlebars. And then the safety bicycle was invented. The really big deal here was pneumatic tires, Dunlop. You know, Dunlop tires are still around today, but they made it so that it wasn't bone crushing to ride on the bad roads. Brakes were invented, there was a chain drive. This thing was amazing. People were thrilled, and immediately people started going on these really long distance bike rides like across the world. And so there's a cycling roadmap of England and Wales that's from the late 1800s. So, about the time the bicycle was being very popularized, the city of Tacoma was being populated. So you can see there's this little population graph. In 1880, there were about 1,300 people living here. Then the Transcontinental Railroad was built. And the terminus of the Transcontinental Railroad is Tacoma. So things during the Civil War were not going so great in the North and South. So Abraham Lincoln decided to connect the East and the West. And instead of Seattle or Olympia being the terminus, Tacoma was. And it really influenced the development here. The picture you see here is Pacific Avenue. Or looking down, Pacific Avenue is down there on your right. It's so big that even a pointer. So this is Pacific Avenue. This is where the I-5 is currently. So the railroad brought people. So then in a 10-year period, we grew from like 1,300 people to 36,000 residents. And then there was another huge jump in population in 1910. Just before World War II, lots and lots of immigrants came from Europe, mostly Northern Europe, and they really settled Tacoma. So some people here may have heard of the Tacoma Wheelman's Bicycle Club. It was started, these are the original Tacoma Wheelman's Bicycle Club. It's still in existence today. They got together, they were an advocacy group, and they got together for social reasons, of course, but then also because they wanted bicycle highways built. So they went to city council and they got a $1 license fee for everyone, for every bike, and with this $1, they built the first roads in Tacoma. So you could ride from here to American Lake, you could ride from here to Mount Rainier, to Puyallup, and it was so popular and so much fun that the ferries would come down from Seattle on weekends full of people who would come with their bikes or rent bikes here and ride to American Lake and have lunch and then ride back and go back on the ferry. Oh, and this is, you probably recognize, this is Pacific Avenue on like 9th. Bicycling was also such a big deal that it was in the newspapers like every day. If I had actually had time to go through all the newspapers, it was remarkable. It was what people did. It was what was fun. There were all kinds of competitions and contests. The other thing about bicycling is that it transformed women's lives and gave them independence. It also transformed what women wore. So I'm going to read to you 1896. Farmer Dillow says, "There are those women riding by with trousers on. If my wife Maria should take a notion to ride one of those things and wear bloomers, I would certainly get a divorce." It was a big problem because it was such a cultural shift. But newspapers, you know, they were more conversational, gossipy, you know, in those days. Bicycling was a huge industry. So this is the Tacoma Daily Ledger, 1896, and if you go through the paper, there are so many ads for bicycle shops, it is remarkable. We had here in Tacoma, right by where Holy Rosary is, over the gully, that's like I-5, we had the longest, highest, and only exclusive bicycle bridge in the world, built with the funds of bicycle tabs, and it was an amazing thing. Okay, this I just have up here because I love this photo so much. This is Wright Park in 1900. It's like still life with bicycle. And this was when Yakima still went through the park before they, blocked it off on Division. Oh, and those are the little trees that are now our champion trees, right? So 112 years later, look what we have. It's incredible. This is Pacific Avenue in 9th, and this is just like, there's a streetcar, there's bicycles, there's pedestrians, there's so much life, there's absolute chaos. It was a great thing. This is 1908, somewhere in Tacoma, just to show you that bikes and beers have always matched. This is on South Tacoma Way. In here you can see that sidewalks were built before streets were built. The streets were just a muddy mess most of the year, and so the focus was really first on moving pedestrians. Everyone was a pedestrian. Everyone walked right back then, and so it was about moving people on foot more than moving people on streets. This is a gentleman who I swear looks like he just walked out of Portland, Oregon yesterday, and I call him the original fixie hipster, because this, right? It's amazing. Bicycles were, of course, used for transportation a lot. This is on A Street, across from the old post office. A lot of these pictures are right down in the area, right? This is like next to, is this your building? Oh. Watermark.
Well, it was at the other end in the Perkins building. That's where the underground was.
Oh, yeah. This is 6th Ave in Prospect, so it's 1923. You can see the rails for the streetcar. And the street was paved. It's still raining. It was raining then. It's raining now. The amazing thing about the bicycle culture and population here, especially during the early turn of the century, is that people would literally ride a bike from here to Mount Rainier, but they didn't have any speeds or anything, you know? I mean, it was a really, really heavy bike. It's not like you see water bottles on them or anything. It's really, they were hardier, much hardier people, except for this gentleman from the Courage class. He's really hardy. There's this event called Bike Week, Bike Month in May, some places in April. Bicycle Day in Tacoma started in 1925. As far as I can find, it might have been earlier. This grandpa built this little bike for his grandson, because until this time there was like one size of bike, and they didn't have like a special thing to accommodate kids. So little kids would just, you know, sort of, you know, learn how to ride on something that was outsized for them. This. Okay, the words are from Minneapolis. I couldn't resist them. But this is a woman named Lucy Farrar, and she had a home near here, near downtown, and she also had a home on American Lake, and she would ride between the two of them all the time. And she rode that bike until she was well into her late 80s, and I think she's stylish and fabulous. Many of you can tell me where this is, right? Stadium Bowl. During the 30s, things were a little rough economically, but people had a lot of fun on bikes. There were all kinds of contests and parades, and this is Pacific Avenue, and this was the annual parade, costume parade. And if you didn't have the money to have a bike and bring a bike, the bike shops would loan you a bike.
What was the cost of a bicycle back in those days?
You know, I've been trying to figure that out, and you know, with the cost of inflation and everything, they were not so cheap. And certainly, like the penny farthings, I think from what I can figure out, they cost like about what would be $1,200 now. And I'm not sure how much they were now, because they weren't so mass produced. They started to be mass produced, like actually, like in the 20s, like at Montgomery Ward and Sears and all those kinds of stores. This couple with their little dog Toto just got married, and their honeymoon is down in Northern California, and they're riding their bikes together to their honeymoon. The gentleman on the bike is a dock worker, and he's down on the port, and that's his mode of transportation. I love this picture because it shows just how overbuilt some of our streets are. This is Pacific Avenue and like South 36. And then the 50s came along. Post-war, car was king. And so what happened is that you know, the bicycle started really taking a back seat to the car, and it became like a kid's toy. Like every kid had a trike, every kid has a bicycle. Some adults have the bike in the garage, but don't use it so much. And then the bike moves indoors too, right, as exercise equipment, right? So this was a fitness center in Tacoma, and they had an ad that said that if you rode this bike in their fitness center, like every day for a year, at the end of the year, your bus size would increase 2 sizes. I don't know what the relationship is. This is one of the sort of mid-century homes in Tacoma. So it's 1961. There's a kid with his bike, and his little brother with the bucket on his head, because the little brother always does, is standing on a bomb shelter. So it's very much of the era, right? Then the 70s came along. So there was this big gap of time when people weren't riding bikes, and then the 70s came along, and it was sort of an environmental movement, the 60s, health and freedom, and people started like biking across the country. There were new styles of bikes like this Stingray down there with that basket. That was the bike I always wanted. But my mom wouldn't buy it because she said, you're going to put your brother on the handlebars and your sister on the back seat and it won't be safe. But I did that anyway with the bike I had. So, and Bash 73, does someone know what Bash is?
Building of Scholastic Heritage.
And does Bash still exist?
No.
No. And on the top, that's Mayor Jacobs from 1973, having some fun with some kids. And the city of Tacoma came up with its first bikeway plan in the 70s. And it was kind of a good plan, had some great ideas for connecting up bike networks in the city, but it just really sat on the shelf.
I think his name was Johnson.
Johnson, not Jacobs?
Gordon Johnson.
Good. Thank you for helping me with that. So now in 2012, in every big city in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, bicycling is an indicator of economic health. Bicycling is also becoming an economic indicator of human health. Because the more time you spend in your car, the unhappier you are. I mean, there's an absolute correlation. But also, the less physically fit you are, the less happy you are. And so, bicycling has taken over. The other thing is that the big cities, I was just in New York City. I just came back on Saturday night. And more and more people are moving there, and they cannot build their streets out anymore. They cannot build any more capacity in their roadways. All they can do is make it so that people feel safer riding bikes and use the existing right-of-way and move people that way. There's been some support in Congress, federal government. We have some friends in Washington State who also support active transportation. The city passed Complete Streets resolution a couple years ago, and this means that when streets are reconstructed or where there's new development, you should look at accommodating all users. So pedestrians should be able to cross the street safely, bicyclists should have room, cars of course are there, buses should have room. In the upper left it's New York City, and that's a really great street because buses are separate, bikes are separate, cars are separate from one another, and it's the safest way to go. Upper right is London. Those are bicycle superhighways. They go for like hundreds of kilometers. And then in the bottom is Vancouver, British Columbia. They took 2 entire lanes out of Dunsmuir downtown. Even though the capacity was really full and congested, they said, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that more people can move on bicycles, and so when they get here, they'll have an easy place to park. Because right now it costs about $40,000 to construct a parking stall, but a bike rack costs like $200. And so the more people you have coming to business districts on bikes, the better off the situation. I recently put a bike rack on street on 6th Avenue in front of the Red Hot. And it's in an entire parking space, but often there'll be 16 or 20 bikes parked there. And so would you rather have 20 bikes parked there or 20 people trying to find parking on busy 6th Ave? It makes a lot of sense. The business district really supported it, and I'm looking forward to doing more work like that. We have a new mobility master plan, and this provides guidance for the city to build bikeways networks and pedestrian improvements all across the city. The people who are riding bike in Tacoma right now are in this category called strong and fearless. It's less than 1%. Then there's a bunch of us who are enthused and confident. Like, who in this room feels like they're enthused and confident? Couple. Strong and fearless? We got 2. But then there's this whole other category that's interested but concerned, and these are people who feel like, it was fun when I rode my bike when I was a kid, and it would be great for short trips to the Proctor Farmers Market or whatever, but I don't feel safe. And this is largely a category that includes women. You know, I just don't feel safe on the street with the cars. I don't feel safe my kids riding in the street with the cars. And so we're trying to figure out how to construct bikeways so that that category of interested but concerned is more comfortable. And one way to do it is by providing different roadway design. So we're constructing a bikeways network, and those blue lines you see are existing bike lanes, and then the red lines are going to pop up. This is Park Avenue, South 96th to South 50th, North 24th, G, and that's South 37. So this is going to be the foundation of our bikeways networks. I recently got a phone call from Norm Dick's office, and I thought it was a prank call, honestly, in DC, you know, it was the 202 area code, and they said, well, we want you to know you got that $1 million grant you applied for. I was like, oh, that's great. Would you confirm this in an email or something? So this is going to be constructed with a federal discretionary grant. I also got another local grant for $500,000. So this will be happening next construction season in the summer. We have a long-term bikeways network that will look like this, so the city is all connected up. You can go from point anywhere to anywhere, any destination on a bike. We do a lot of other work in addition to just road work, and it's programmatic, bike month events, safety campaigns. I've worked with law enforcement. I got a grant, got a bunch of bike lights. So I worked with Lieutenant Darlington so that his officers, when they see people riding bikes at night without lights, they have a little card that says what the law is, but instead of giving them a ticket, they give them a light set. So it's, you know, positive behavior modification. In Copenhagen, they had a campaign where law enforcement would stand on the corner, and if people weren't wearing helmets, they'd fit a helmet and give them a hug. I don't think our law enforcement's ready for that, but it's a good idea. And just to finish up really, bicycling is the most sustainable form of transportation. It's incredibly energy efficient. Oh, this is the Water Ditch Trail, which is in South Tacoma. Do folks know about this? This is our old planning commissioner, Scott Morris, and we're going to finish construction of it again next construction season, but it goes from South 80th, kind of parallel South Tacoma Way, all the way to 43rd, goes through South Park. So this is the direction that transportation is taking because of all of the issues of oil, because of air quality, because of health. We have here in Pierce County, the obesity rate is really high, it's like 63%. And so some of that is because people aren't out and moving, and so the health department works with me a great deal on these efforts. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.